Hey, Angela. Hey, Scott.
Hey guys. Wow, you must have both come on at the same time.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Hang on, Scott,
Hey,
I'm switching you.
how you feeling today, Don?
A little fatigued, same. Yeah, but I appreciate you asking. And I think it's just another type of bug or virus. I'm going to be optimistic. So
Yeah.
I think the cold chills are calming down, but I don't know. We'll see.
Does Cindy have anything, or is it just you?
No, no. So far, just me. And we discussed, hey, do you want me to start wearing a mask here at home? And she's like, well, if you do have it, then sure, she's already got it. But and when we're working here, she's in one room, I'm in another, and stuff like that. So we
Yeah.
so but right now she's not showing any signs. She's had some sinus issues and stuff like that as well. But I don't know. So, but we'll see what goes on tomorrow. I won't know anything, I guess, till next week though. So but
Yeah, I
at
don't
least
know
they
how
can
long it
maybe.
takes.
Yeah, I don't know either. But they're going to come out to the car to me. But maybe they can give me some advice or stuff. I've been taking some NyQuil in case it's just one of those type things. But
Yeah.
anyway, so what I do right before these webinars, I try to drink a Pepsi or a Mountain Dew to get perked up, and then I crash hard afterwards, man.
Yeah. You have sick leave. Take it if you need it.
Oh, I know. That's for other stuff, right? I'm not sure what that's for.
No, it's for if you're not feeling well. Take sick leave. Sleep.
Yeah, I got about a year's worth, but I'm saving
Exactly.
it for some weird reason,
Ah, people.
Who
All right.
knows?
So I
Yeah,
assume you two saw the email from Terry.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm betting it's when your laptop froze up. I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that was the first thing that popped into my mind. I'm like, ah. But when I just logged in today, it was not
Uh,
recording. It didn't automatically start. So I need to shoot him an
uh,
email about that. I
How can
did
you
press the
tell?
button, so we are recording.
How can you
But-
tell where it's recording?
So up under, well, at the very bottom, you'll see this little red dot that says this session is being recorded.
Yeah, I swear I saw that yesterday.
Yeah, and then up under sharing, you'll
Mm-hmm.
see a little red dot that says stop recording. When I
Ah,
first logged on, it said something about press button to start recording.
hmm.
So that was interesting. So anyway, it is being recorded because I pressed the button or because I need to look at it.
mm.
But anyway, so today, let's see, what's the order? Looks like I start,
Yeah. Then
then
I've got
Dawn,
a couple. Yeah.
and then I've got a bunch of stuff, including Marsha's management review. Okay.
And Scott, I'll
That's
be,
cool.
we could tag team. I'll be helping you with hand raising, questions, etc. So I'll be engaged the whole time with that as well. So
Okay, that's what I figure. Since you all are doing the real work, I mean, I can be in charge of the Q&A. I'm in the office today, so I'm not gonna drop internet service every 5 minutes. So,
You're
or
not gonna
fingers
get
crossed.
Sentry linked.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, fun
I thought
stuff.
yesterday went fine though. The way everybody was tag teaming, I was happy with it. So.
Yeah, it went well, and once the technical issues
Yeah.
decided to
I
work
mean, I was
themselves out.
frustrated for my internet, so I appreciate
Yeah.
all, you guys filling in for me. Could you tell when I went in and out?
No, I couldn't
No,
tell. You just disappeared at one point.
yeah. At one point, I just jumped in on the questions. I'm thinking, I'm not sure if Scott saw or maybe you were having issues. So
Yeah. Like I
yeah, I
wondered if
just
my name just
mm,
disappeared from the staff list.
No, I wasn't looking.
Like I wondered what that looked like, or did my, the like mute or microphone thing just disappear and my name was still there?
I think your
What?
name was definitely still there, but I can't recall if anything else had changed.
Well, what did it look like when my computer froze yesterday.
Well, your name remained, but then suddenly Dee's name appeared.
That
And
was
actually
when
And I
I
didn't
logged.
see that.
I can
Yeah,
only
so
see Dee's name right now. Oh, now it just switched. Literally
Yeah,
just.
Yeah, I
just
just
switched.
did it. Yeah, because
Okay.
But at one
I
point,
log in from the software on the browser.
Sure.
And when you do that, it comes in as D, and then you have to click on it to change it.
Mm.
So I just did
yeah,
that.
well, during that point, both your name and Dee's name was there. So.
Huh, that's weird. Yeah, I
Did
don't
you
know what
know?
happened.
I was just clicking around in the toolbar, and up under options,
Mm,
there's a checkbox that attendees can view attendee list. So that is an option. I don't know why we'd want that, but maybe thinking about I don't know, did either of you know that that was an option?
No, I didn't.
No.
I didn't realize it wasn't on.
Yeah, so it's not on right now. It's not checked, but I was thinking that would be good for the ESI, like the panel that we just had, the
Yeah.
reopening panel. So that way folks can have, if they want to chat with each other,
Yeah.
just like if we were in a room, to try to simulate that live workshop or live
Right.
roundtable.
Right. Yep.
And I'd had a chat with Terry at the end of yesterday, and I mentioned that having that chat thing. Looks like you figured that out.
What?
That welcome everyone, we'll get started right at 1.
I did. I figured it out.
You figured out that, yeah, so that it kind of stays at the top.
Yeah, I found it
Yeah.
yesterday.
Okay.
It must have been one of your off moments because I was
Oh, okay.
talking to Marcia about it.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of Terry, we had a meeting this morning, still working on edits for the DCAN report. And it looks like we found some room for the October webinar, Scott, for the energy webinar. So that's going to be put in there with our environmental benchmarking series and networking. So good news for that. So
That was
Okay.
the 50,001 overview, something
you
like
got
that.
it. You got
Yeah.
it. So
Cool.
anyway, yeah, we're trying to work on where to put the splash page and this and that. And if we want to put it here, that means we've got to shrink this down to put that up there, and all kinds of things. So last minute rearrangements and additions. But anyway, and I did mention to him that I thought the webinar's been going great this week. So, but I forgot all about your computer freezing up, so I hadn't mentioned that to him this morning. So
Yeah, I did.
yeah, I saw that. So. Oh man.
Speaking of CenturyLink, they came out, or a subcontractor came out and sprayed and marked. They did we have underground from the street, underground utilities.
Yep.
And they flagged and sprayed where the line comes to the house. So
Yeah, a few years ago, living at somewhere else here in Greenville, still Suddenlink, they had to come out and do that, and they pulled up the entire line that was buried. Turns out it had been compromised with water leakage and things like that. They just replaced the whole thing. Man,
yeah,
they were
it's
brutal. They destroyed a bird feeder and stuff like that. But that it seemed to help. So
yeah, the part that's frustrating is that there's not correlated to anything, like on a windy day, a sunny day, raining, at night, daytime, Shannon's home, Shannon's not home. Like I wish there was a pattern, because then that'd be
yeah,
easier to, speaking of root cause,
Mhm.
that's the most frustrating part, is like, if there's no pattern, then, okay, we'll just bore a new line, and then hopefully that fixes it. And if not, then I don't know what happens.
Angela, if you need a new example today, maybe we can have Scott introduce
Yeah.
CenturyLink issues.
I can't give them too hard of a time. They did give me a discount, but for 1 month credit. I still speak ill of them whenever I can.
Yeah.
Mm-mm-mm.
Did you ever reach out to that person that I forwarded you?
No, I didn't. I don't know if Lee did or not. We haven't had any issues. Knock on wood, since I've been working from home, it hasn't been nearly as bad as it has been in the past. So I don't know what's going on. It's strange.
You're taking my service.
That's what it is. That's exactly what it is.
It's probably because they have, 100 customers and they only have enough internet for 80 of them. And it just kind of bounces around like, who gets the empty bucket today?
Mm-hmm. Or maybe
I know
enough
that's
people
not how
in,
they work,
I
but
was gonna say maybe enough people in our area have switched over to another service
yeah,
provider that it's increased the
right,
bandwidth.
right,
I
right.
just don't have the option.
I know. That is funny though. If they lose enough customers, like it'll be better for everybody else, but then at some point they're gonna go defunct. Yeah.
Here you can tell when ECU and the students are back in place 100%, because in years past, that's when it really slowed down for us. But then they put in these little mini towers last year, and all throughout the city. It's really improved it. You can barely tell any lag time now, but before you knew when the semesters were in and when the semesters are out. So anyway.
Do you see? I actually got real pictures from Leggett and Platt inserted in here.
Oh.
Does that look like water to you guys? It looks like water to me for some reason, like a muddy pond instead of a concrete wall.
I can see a
Oh,
reflection.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely looks like
That's
a pond, especially the
wow. That's
light. It looks like a
well.
muddy ditch.
Yeah, I guess that's just the grading.
Yeah, it's
When you
just
said
really weird.
concrete wall, I was like, where?
It's easier to see in this one.
Yeah, but even there, that's
Even
like
there,
a
yeah.
brain. It's like a brain
Yeah.
teaser. It really is.
It's like those
What do you see? And
do you see two faces or do you see the vase?
Yeah.
Or the
Scott, I was
vase?
going to bring that up. But yeah, that's a great brain teaser. Yeah.
Yep.
This will
It's
determine your personality trait type,
so
What do you
weird.
see? Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's it's the strangest thing. Anyway.
Hmm.
Dawn?
And I'll admit it, Angela, if this gets any worse, yeah, I may have to burn some time. But right now, my objective was to get through this week.
I hear you.
And next Thursday, that webinar. So
Yeah. Well, the good news is that's mostly Jenny and Rose
and
talking.
Rose, yeah.
Or on that, did you need me for Q&A for that one? Or no?
We'd love to have you for Q&A.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be helping with that too.
Yeah, we were going to try the hand raising again and the question box. So
Okay. Yeah, and
yeah,
I
that'd be
think
great.
I have on my schedule that I'm coming in that day. So.
Okay, great.
I will probably try and do my part from home, so I'm glad you're coming in, because if I get CenturyLinked, then you'll have to take it over.
Yeah. Although, my
And the good
computer
news is when Jenny and Rose are talking, I mean, I'll be keeping track of time and all, but I can hop in there as well and keep my eyes on it.
True.
If something happens to one of y'all,
Oh, just kidding. It didn't freeze. I was trying to click. I have it on full screen, and I was trying to click on the the things at the bottom there, and I was like, wait a minute, Firefox. I don't use Firefox.
Yeah, I could make it big so it doesn't show all that.
No, I've got it. Like I said, in full screen. I kind of don't like that you have to hit escape to get out of full screen.
Yeah.
I'm used to it. That's kind of the way they all are.
Yeah, but it'd be nice if there was a button somewhere.
Yeah. I actually just had to hit escape multiple times to get out of the full screen. I don't know what was going on with that. I did reboot just before I came over to this office, so hopefully I don't have the same problem I had yesterday.
Or were you in Terry's office?
Yeah, I always just come over here. That way I don't
Yeah.
have to wear my mask and, well, not that I
Yeah.
have to wear it in my office, but I'm just not annoying anybody who might be in the office or have,
Or vice versa.
yeah, exactly. Or have folks with like loud jangly keys or talking to each other in the hallway right beside me or whatever.
Or talking to themselves while jangling keys.
That happens too.
Or other bodily sounds.
But yes, whatever. It's less distractions in this room. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I went to bed before 10 o'clock last night. I think it was just all the rain.
Yeah.
Like at least here in the building, I get the natural daylight, but I don't get to like see or hear the rain all day here in the
Yeah.
office. But at home, I mean, it's definitely apparent that it was raining for the last 3 days straight.
Yeah. I'm just tired. I've had driving to work every day this week.
Yeah,
It's awful.
not used to that.
And Jamie and I were talking about that this morning. So Jamie's in the office today, Dawn. So we were chatting, and she's like, "Yeah, I think upstairs is finally seeing that not only does teleworking work, we are professionals and can do our jobs from anywhere, but that a lot of people are actually showing increased productivity
Yeah.
by doing it. So maybe when things go back to normal, in quotes, there will be more folks stationed from home,
Yeah.
with more communal workspaces when we come back in, but not necessarily, individual offices, or who knows. She's like, it's all up in the air at the moment. Who knows? But, they were having trouble finding places for everybody to sit and all of that. So anyway.
Well, that Monday night, Tuesday morning, when all this kicked in health-wise, and then finally come out, we had a CenturyLink moment, even though we're not on CenturyLink, Suddenlink. No, they had a massive outage here in the eastern part of the state, millions, they said, without internet, phone, cable. We were one of those. My wife was monitoring it, didn't know when she should wake me up. Finally, about 10 till 5, she's like, we still don't have it. They said it would be repaired by 2:30, because she had to make a decision. Does she go, downtown to work or what? And I'm like, at first I thought, I was so delusional. I was like, well, that's okay. It's Saturday. What's the big deal? And then I realized, I went, oh no, because I had the rehearsal webinar for Has Waste, and then this one. It's like, what? I got to pack everything up. I got to get to Raleigh. And then on my way there, I got as far as just past Wilson when she called and said, guess what? It's restored. But I was thinking at the same time, one, where should I do this in Green Square? And do they even want me there if I'm this sick? So
No.
I was in a panic. So luckily she called me. I was back home by 7:15, in the morning. Because I turned around. I got past I-95, and I turned around in Bailey, came back, and then I had to call my nurse and then figure out what's wrong with me health-wise. But yeah, that was one of my things is, where would I even go once I got there so I wouldn't get anyone else sick? So
for future reference, Dawn, don't come in.
Yeah.
If you are sick at all, just don't come in.
Oh, I know. Well, then my other option was, I wonder if they'll let me go to Washington to do the webinars from there, but there was no guarantee Washington, Waro would have had their services up. So that was a panic Tuesday morning, but Yeah. I got past I-95 and back home by 7:15 in the morning. So,
No, if you're not feeling well and internet goes out or whatever, just text Marsha or I, and
yeah.
we will cover whatever it is
Yeah.
you're supposed to be doing.
Well, I didn't want to wake I don't want to bother anybody at 5 in the morning. So, I don't know. I was so panicky, and my mind wasn't right anyway. So,
So nothing was going on until 10, so it was fine.
I
You would have
know. Well, that's why I
plenty
kept
of
telling me.
time.
That's why I kept telling myself, you got plenty of time, got plenty of time.
Plenty of time. You could have texted me at 5. I would have seen it at 6:30. It would have been fine.
I'll be right back.
Yep.
All right. Well, even if she had called me by the time I got to Nightdale, I'm like, I still have time to turn around and go back home. So, anyway, I'm glad I did. And we haven't had a problem with it since. But as of Tuesday evening or Wednesday morning, they still said a substantial amount of the community was out. So,
Mm.
and I think what was it, T-Mobile on Monday or something, or that night across the country? It also hit US Cellular. She noticed that same night, she was down to like one bar of service.
Mm.
And I think it hit another cell phone company as well. I'm wondering if somebody did a cyber attack or something.
Maybe.
Mm.
Could be.
Well, I did put in the effort, even though it might have been a misguided effort.
No matter how discombobulated you are, just remember,
Yeah.
we don't want you here if you were sick with anything. Just
Oh
stay home.
yeah, that was the other thing in my head. I was like, what am I doing driving there anyway if I'm contagious? So
Exactly.
anyway, ugh.
Jamie was telling me that in one of the regional offices, somebody actually ended up testing positive. So they went and
Yeah.
got the test and then went back to work
Oh
before they found out the results. And
yeah,
then
I
they
can't
found
do
out the
that.
results that they were positive. So I'm like, why would you go back to work if you have symptoms?
No, you're supposed to
Enough
stay
to get
quarantined. Yeah,
exactly. So
yeah,
and instead she potentially infected anybody else she came in contact with that day
yeah.
and the next few days, however long it took for her to get the results. So
Wow. And that's why I said, well, at least I'm already in quarantine basically. But
yeah.
Cindy found out somebody in GC tested positive. So yeah, I think every place everywhere. Denzo made the news here. They had somebody test
Did
positive.
they?
Yeah. They think they got it though from a family member and then brought it to work. So
Yeah. It's the bringing it to work piece.
yeah. All right.
I don't know.
That's the farthest I've driven that Tuesday morning. Everything's been local.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
Lee and I went to Charlotte on
yeah.
Saturday.
The
So
Kia.
that's the furthest we've been. Although he tends to go over to Greensboro every now and then to pick up the soda that he likes. The bottler in our area doesn't make it anymore. So he had to figure out how far out he had to go to find it. So
I'm back,
Greensboro is
just
the
FYI.
bottom left.
All right.
Okay. By the way, Don, you're up to 40. I don't know if I told you that yesterday
Oh,
or not.
okay. Cool. That little reminder helped. Yes.
Mhm. Yeah. That's why I mentioned you might want to do it.
Yeah.
UC lost another person. Did I
Oh,
tell you
who
that?
left? No.
Holly,
Okay, I don't know that
the
I
one
ever
that,
met.
yeah, she's super nice, just fairly quiet. But she sat behind me in that cube there on the corner.
Yeah,
next to Lisa.
yeah, I had seen her name on the little sign,
Mhm.
but I don't think I ever
Yeah.
met her.
But Julie moved from where she sat, kind of next to Mike, when she moved behind me into Holly's old desk. So I think it's just Julie and Reed right now.
Really?
Yeah. Not that that really impacts us, but to
Right.
have it's nice to have a solid UC team because we can always feed off of each other for the energy stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was nice when UC was part of us.
Well, yeah, sure. So is Christopher Lott,
Mm-hmm.
is he taking over from Kelly?
No, he's an intern.
Oh, he is. Okay, gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mackenzie is probably our best bet for a contact there right now.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'd be surprised if she doesn't apply for Kelly's job.
And did she know anything about that treasure hunt that they did? The
No,
DOE?
well, I don't know how much she knows about it, but she's too new. It was
Mm,
Kelly's first week at the facility, and
yeah.
Mackenzie's only been there for the last year or two.
Mm,
So,
okay.
although I'm not sure when, but she'll be going out on maternity leave at some point. So, all right, guys, I'm gonna start the broadcast. So behave yourselves.
All right.
Hey, everybody, we're gonna give them a couple more minutes to get on. We'll get started right at 1 again. All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you all got my email. The first time I sent it, it said it was too big for a lot of your emails systems, so I split it up and sent them out again. But the recording from yesterday, unfortunately, did not work, probably because of the technical difficulties we were having there at the very beginning. So I apologize for that. I did send you the slides instead. But if you have any questions at all about the things we went over yesterday, feel free to just shoot us an email, or, well, that's probably the easiest way to get hold of us right now. So just kind of yesterday we talked through competence and awareness and resources and things like that for your training piece. We talked about both internal and external communication, documentation and document control, and then we had the whole operational control with that airport example. So if you have any questions about that, just go ahead and raise your hand, or type a question in the chat box. I have Scott and Dawn with me today. Marcia is actually on her way driving up to New York. Her mom is going to have a procedure soon, so she was going up there to be with her during that. So we don't have Marcia today, but if you have a question on anything that she's responsible for that we can't answer, we'll be sure to get with her and get you an answer. So not seeing any questions popping in. So in that case, today we're going to be talking about emergency preparedness and response, and monitoring and measurement, compliance evaluation, internal auditing, management review, and then corrective actions. So basically, it's just a little bit more of the do section with the emergency preparedness, and then everything else is either in the check or act portion of that plan, do, check, act cycle. So let's get started. I'm going to make my screen big so you can see it better, I think. There we go. So emergency preparedness and response. So I think it was Monday, I mentioned as I was going through some of my slides that you actually define what your potential emergencies could be in 611, but you are going to deal with them later on. Well, welcome to later on. So the ISO 14001 standard element 8.2 says the organization shall establish, implement, control, and maintain the processes needed to prepare for and respond to potential emergency situations that you identified back earlier in the standard. The organization shall prepare to respond by planning actions to prevent or mitigate adverse environmental impacts from emergency situations, respond to actual emergencies, take action to prevent or mitigate consequences of those emergencies, periodically test the planned response actions where practicable. Hopefully everybody remembers my little speech about practicable versus practical. So that means if at all possible. And what I tell our members when I'm out looking at this in their sites is even if what you do to test your plans is like a benchtop test, you can do that with just about anything. You don't have to necessarily set off an alarm or something like that, although you should, do those tests so your employees know what to do as much as possible. But for things that you really can't simulate, go ahead and do those benchtop tests. Periodically review and revise processes and planned response actions, in particular after the occurrence of emergency situations or tests, and provide relevant information and training related to emergency preparedness and response. And then you shall maintain documented information to the extent necessary to have confidence that the processes are carried out as planned, which means you need some way to capture that you have done those tests, that when something does go wrong, that you have evaluated what went wrong and how to fix it and to make sure it doesn't happen again, as far as bad reactions. So let's break it down a little bit. So it says you need to take action to prevent or mitigate the consequences. So before a situation even arises, what can you do to reduce that impact should it happen? This is actually new to the 2014 standard. There was an emergency preparedness and response piece in the 2004 standard, it was not as in-depth as this one is. So we just want to give you an example of some of the things that we've seen and brought to the attention of some of our members. So we have a member in High Point. This is not a picture of their plant, but it's very similar. I will show you a picture from inside of their plant out in a minute. But they have both a railroad track that runs right next to their plant, as close as this one is to this building. And they also kind of sit under an overpass where cars are getting onto a freeway. It's not an interstate, but it's also, but it is a very, very busy road. And so their parking lot, or at least part of their parking lot, actually sits underneath this overpass. I like to pick on them about being trolls under the bridge. So, and they hadn't actually thought about either one of these things. It's part of their daily lives. They are in a building that's like close to 100 years old, and this train track's been there forever. And the road up above them doesn't go across their building, but it does cross their parking lot. And so they never really think about that. They just appreciated the shade for the parking for those folks that worked up front in that area. So things they didn't think about were, what if, God forbid there was an accident up there that a car went flying off and landed on their roof. It's a possibility that they just needed to think through what kinds of potential issues there might be within their building. What happens if there is a train, those tracks are still used, but what happens if this happens? That track is really close to that building, and a train could easily derail and knock into the side of their building. So what kinds of things can they do to avoid having environmental issues in addition to any personal or safety issues? This is actually outside of their maintenance area. You can see how close the railroad tracks are. This is like a 6 or 8 foot picnic table. This is a concrete wall. This is not water. I know it looks like a muddy pond or a ditch or something. This is a concrete wall. You can kind of see the lip of it right here that goes right. So it's like 10, 20 feet at the most away from their building, this railroad track right here. So what kinds of things should they be thinking about when they are taking those actions to prevent environmental issues? So some of the things that we have suggested to them is make sure they don't have any chemical storage on that side of the building. If a train were to derail and knock into it, you don't want your potential environmental issues to become everybody's potential environmental issues, right? So while the train might be carrying something hazardous, you don't want it to have any kind of interaction with something that you might have. Maybe what either one of you have is fine on its own, but when they're mixed, it becomes an issue. So something to think about, for them is to make sure they don't have any chemical storage, make sure they don't have any processes that use chemicals on that side of the building. Maybe there are some safety things that you need to look at in addition, for your employees. Maybe you have large equipment closer to the wall so that there is more of a barrier there just in case it happens during the day. So they've never had an issue here. There's no reason to expect an issue, but that's the point of this piece of the standard, is to make sure you're taking into account anything that might happen. So another example, so we have lots of facilities that have these above ground storage tanks outside. So one of our facilities down east, we've mentioned them a couple of times already, and specifically about this example, but they have a tank similar to this, and in the two floods or hurricanes that we've had fairly recently down that way, their facility completely got surrounded by water. Luckily, the water didn't get into the plant itself, but they have this above ground storage tank out a little bit further away, and it did get flooded, at least underneath. It didn't get all the way over the top of it, but it came up the sides. And the first time they had a flood, this actually lifted up because it was, while it has those lines coming down that attached to the ground and to, you know, of course, their piping system to their building, it was inside of a secondary containment that was basically a metal tray. And it was attached to that metal tray, but the metal tray wasn't attached to the concrete below. And so it actually floated that metal tray up a little bit. Now, luckily, it wasn't an issue that caused the piping to break, and they didn't even realize it had happened, but we happened to go out there with them, and we're walking around their site, and we noticed that there were some little twigs kind of sticking out from underneath that metal tray, and we were like, how did that happen? And he's like, oh my God, I think this thing floated. And so after that, they made sure that it was secure to the ground, and the next time they flooded it, their tank did not float. So again, they reacted to what the emergency was, and then they put into place things to keep an issue from happening again. So you can kind of see where we're going with this. So again, you don't want it to look like that, and that is not a picture of their plant. That is just a picture of a floating tank.
Angela?
Right. Yes, sir.
We just had an example comment come in.
Sure.
So this person is saying that UMA is near an Air Force base, and during their last surveillance audit, the auditor asked, what if an Air Force plane crashed onto their property? And they added that to their emergency response.
Great. Yes, absolutely. If you are in the flight path of an airport, you should absolutely have that as part of your emergency preparedness. What I was just going to bring up is every one of us now should have pandemics as part of our emergency preparedness. How many changes have you had to make to your management system in order to make sure that things still function safely and that you're getting your reports in on time and you're doing your testing when it's required, and all of that? How many health things have you had to put into place for your employees? You know, what kind of new chemicals have you had to bring in for cleaning purposes? Think about all those things. And if you have an emergency preparedness form that you fill out for responding after actual emergencies, I would use that and actually figure out all of those pieces that you need to have put in place so that you can demonstrate if you're a third-party system, or even if you have a functionally equivalent system with us, you can demonstrate that you have done this evaluation. All right. So the standard also says to periodically test the planned actions where practicable. Again, practicable if at all possible. Do those benchtop tests if you can't do a physical, you know, we all go through the fire alarms. We all go through the tornado tests that, you know, make sure everybody knows where to go. But make sure you don't forget all those other potential issues like the airplanes, like the floods. Do a benchtop test. Sit down with all the people who would have to respond to it and talk through what would happen and find any, you know, gaps in your system. You also need to periodically review and revise the process, in particular after the occurrence of emergency situations or tests. So we just mentioned several of those that you should take into account, including our current situation. So the review could be done during your management review meeting, but it should be done after every test or actual emergency. So you want to make sure, did everything go as it was planned if it was a test? And can the process be improved, or do you need to add processes in? I don't know of any systems that had pandemics in their list already before this event. So, you know, maybe there's new SOPs that need to be written, or new equipment that needs to be purchased, new folks that need to be trained, or new training that needs to be going out. So just make sure that you're thinking about all the different possibilities on emergency preparedness. You also are required to provide relevant information and training related to emergency preparedness and response as appropriate to relevant interested parties, including people working under your control. So interested parties comes back to rear its head from earlier. So think about what kinds of things you do that interested parties might need to know about. You know, do you have an ammonia tank? And so you have folks living nearby and need to know if there's a leak, what to do. You know, look at the flags. Do they need a flag in their yard, or can they see one at your property? You know, what kinds of things do they need to know about that? You definitely need to train your employees on all of your emergency plans so that they know exactly what to do, where to go, how to react. You also need to make sure any contractors or suppliers can access emergency information. What a lot of folks will do is provide a phone number for when they're on site. They might give them a map so they know where the gathering points are for different types of emergencies. You know, maybe they always have an escort, and so the escort knows where they are supposed to go from any point within your facility. And remember, this goes beyond employees and contractors to include anybody who lives near you. Like I was talking about with the ammonia. Well, this isn't a picture of where she used to live, but Marcia lived near a nuclear plant, and they would send out a calendar letting them know when they were going to test the sirens so that they would be aware that when the sirens were going off, whether or not it was a test or if it was something that they needed to react to immediately, right? Okay. Anybody have any questions on emergency preparedness and response? Okay.
I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Okay. All right. Well, Dawn, I will turn it over to you for monitoring and measurement.
Okay, let me bring my screen up here.
All right, you should get the button now.
Okay, can everyone see that? Performance evaluation?
We can see it.
Okay, great. Well, like I said, we'll be going over clause 9.1.1 and 9.1.2, and also into the, and then Angela will take back over during the internal audit portion. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to enter it in the questions box or raise your hand. Be glad to take time and address that. So 9.1.1. This clause is no longer limited to significant impacts. It no longer talks about key characteristics. However, it has added an analysis and evaluation piece. So the organization shall monitor, measure, analyze, and evaluate its environmental performance. The organization shall determine the following: what needs to be monitored and measured, the methods for monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation to ensure valid results, the criteria against which the organization will evaluate its environmental performance, and the appropriate indicators. When monitoring and measuring, when monitoring and measuring shall be performed. Okay, I kind of chopped that up a little bit. And the organization shall determine when the results from monitoring and measurement shall be analyzed and evaluated. Also, the organization shall ensure that the calibrated or verified monitoring and measurement equipment is used and maintained as appropriate. Okay. The organization shall evaluate its environmental performance at the effectiveness of the EMS. The organization shall communicate relevant environmental performance information both internally and externally as identified in its communication process and by its compliance obligations. We talked about that some yesterday, I believe. And also, the organization shall retain documented information as evidence of the monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation results. So we're making sure that your monitoring, measurement, and analyzation, the evaluation of all these have a paper trail, something we can follow back and make sure it's meaningful. Are these indeed valid results that can go pass through not only an audit, an inspection, or when communicating to any external parties? So the evaluation, well, it states that the organization shall evaluate its environmental performance and the effectiveness of the environmental management system. This could be done on many levels. It could be by the EMR or equivalent. As a reminder from yesterday, EMR is your environmental management representative. It could be done by the EMS team, by middle management, or even during a top management review. I remember several occasions, especially working in a laboratory setting, it would go through anywhere from 6 to 7 review levels because we would be audited every year. The auditing team that would show up would be there for about 3 days, anywhere from 5 to 10 people. So every single thing was evaluated. So how could we be proactive to keep those red ink pens in their pockets? Well, go through a process such as this. Now, the communication also states that the organization shall communicate relevant environmental performance information, both internally and externally, as identified in its communication processes and as required by its compliance obligations. So how do you communicate this internally? Well, you have EMS boards, gimbal walks, which I will get back to in a moment, leadership boards, training, emails, and newsletters. That's internally. And I know many of you probably are aware of the gimbal walks, but it's nice to have a little background information just in case you're not. This is a process created by process improvement leaders at Toyota. And the actual translation of the term from the root Japanese word is the real place. Gemba equals the real place. And by closely observing the place where value is created and listening to employees, project leaders, and business managers, they give themselves a fresh perspective on the business and new insights into how changes can make products and services better for customers. I've been fortunate enough to walk through a few of these, be part of some of them. They're really very engaging, upbeat, and it really gives everybody a role in their manufacturing process. So communication externally. You can utilize regulatory agencies, websites, newsletters, news press releases, billboards, which you see many of those throughout facilities, even vehicle magnetic signage. As a contractor, we utilize that quite a bit because any given year, we're traveling half the country. It's a great way to get the message across. So evaluation of compliance, clause 912, states that the organization shall establish, implement, and maintain the process needed to evaluate fulfillment of its compliance obligations. States the organization shall determine the frequency that compliance will be evaluated, evaluate compliance, and take action if needed, and maintain knowledge and understanding of its compliance status. The organization shall retain documented information as evidence of the compliance evaluation results. Documented information, it's a repeated theme in the standard now. So the key difference here is to maintain knowledge and understanding of compliance status. This is something specifically listed in the management review of the 2015 standard. So is there any questions? If not, Angela, I guess we can go back to you.
All right.
I will, well,
You should
okay.
be able to see my screen now.
I can see it, internal audit general.
Awesome. Okay. So again, we're in this checking part of the standard, and one of the ways that the standard has you do that is through internal audits. And you know, you guys have folks that go around and look at all kinds of different things for all different reasons. So we're specifically looking at your environmental management system when we're talking about these internal audits. So the element 921 says the organization shall conduct internal audits at planned intervals to provide information on whether the EMS conforms to the organization's own requirements for its EMS and the requirements of 14001, and to make sure that it's effectively implemented and maintained. There's no real change here from the previous version of the standard, so I'm gonna move on and break this down a little bit for you. So when it says planned intervals, that means that you need to decide how often you are going to actually perform those audits. Third-party auditors that I've dealt with prefer that each element be audited at least annually. But you know, the standard doesn't say that. So you actually have the power here to decide how often you are going to perform these evaluations. Some elements, depending on findings, may require audits more frequently. For example, if you have a new system or a new process that gets put into place, you might want to look at that a little bit more frequently. Have you interviewed employees to see if they understand the policy, and maybe one area folks are a little less aware than others, so maybe that area needs a little bit more attention. For me, I always ask awareness questions, no matter when I'm actually going out and auditing, who I'm auditing, because by the time you're done in all the different places, you've gotten a good random sampling from everywhere to see if that awareness is across the board. And then making sure that they actually are aware of what those significant aspects are, what the EMS is. Do you think once a year asking them that, or asking a few people that, really demonstrates that you have a good awareness across the board, that they are keeping it top of mind, that they can answer that question? So you're also looking at what are you auditing for? So the standard says that you have to look at both the EMS and how you have put items in place, as well as the standard itself, right? So that means any of the checklists that you've put into place, any of the SOPs that you've written, any procedures that you've written, all of that is fair game for auditing, because those are things that you have put onto yourself that you said you would follow. So if you're not following your own procedures, then that would be a finding within the system that needs to be addressed. And then finally, the effectiveness of your implementation and maintenance. So, you know, anybody can write a paper system and put it up on a shelf and never use it. So this is trying to keep your environmental management system live and working. And remember, the whole point of this is continual improvement. So if people aren't using it, then you're not getting that continual improvement of the system. All right, so 922 says the organization shall establish, implement, maintain an internal audit program, including the frequency, methods, responsibilities, planning requirements, and reporting of its internal audits. When establishing your program, the organization shall take into consideration the environmental importance of the processes concerned, changes affecting the organization, and results of previous audits. So again, you know, if something has changed or something is much more important, like for example, you have a significant aspect in that area, perhaps you're going to want to look at it a little bit more frequently or a little bit more in depth. Organization shall define your audit criteria and scope for each audit. select auditors and conduct audits to ensure objectivity and impartiality of the process, and then ensure that the results of the audits are reported to relevant management. And then finally, the organization shall retain documented information as evidence of the implementation of the audit program and audit results. So what records are you going to keep to show that you have performed your audits and reacted to any findings that you have? So we're going to break some of this stuff down a little bit more. So your plan has to include frequency, which is how often you're going to audit each element and or process. The methods, so are you going to use a checklist? Are you going to have teams? Are you going to hire a contractor? Some facilities just hire somebody to do it for them. What kind of pre-work might be necessary? Things like that. You have to include the responsibilities in your plan. So who's going to manage your audits? Do you have a lead auditor, audit team members, management, auditees? Who needs to be responsible for different parts of your internal auditing system? You know, maybe the EMR is the person who assigns all the audits and where you're going to go and what particular area or element is going to be audited at the time. So maybe that needs to be defined in the system. What kind of training might be needed for those people and with each responsibility? Planning requirements. So what do you need to do in order to plan your audit? What kind of training might be necessary? What kind of forms do you have to fill out or know about? Do you have a procedure in place for how you're going to perform this audit? All right. And then reporting. So how are you going to document your findings? What happens if you have a non-conformity or a finding? And then who are you going to report to? Remember, it says relevant management or reported to relevant management. So in the past, of course, and it still is, that you have to report your internal audit findings to upper management during management review. But are they necessarily the only relevant managers that need to know? So I would think that you also need to let the managers of the area where you have the finding in, they might also need to know about this, whereas in the past there was nothing really making you do that, even though it was a good idea. So when you're developing your audit plan, you have to take into account your environmental importance of the process, changes affecting the organization, and results of previous audits. So those processes that have a larger impact, either actual or potential, may need to be reviewed more frequently. If there have been changes, then you may want to review those operations sooner than the operations that have been in place and verified previously. Findings from previous audits should also be reviewed again, a part of the verification of effectiveness, to make sure that any corrections that you put in place are actually working. Audits include more than just internal audits, of course. You might also want to look at findings that have occurred from third-party audits or a compliance audit, or maybe a customer came through and had some suggestions for you. Any other corrective actions maybe that have come into your system not from the auditing structure, all of those kinds of things you'll want to look at in that result of previous audits piece. So basically you're looking to see, do you meet the shall statements, of course? And if you meet them the first time you audit, then why would you ever want to audit again? Well, because things change, people change. People may not be following procedures. Maybe there was a more efficient way to do it that someone found, and instead of telling the person who is in charge of the documentation of that, they just started doing it a different way. So this is one way that you can find those sorts of things and improve your paperwork part of the process so that you can train correctly. Processes and technology might have changed. And what if somebody removed a recycling bin from an area? Of course, that's continual improvement, you know, making sure that things are where they need to be in order for it to be effective for you to meet your goals. All right. And then you're also looking to make sure you're meeting your own requirements, not just the standard. So this is just an example. It's kind of hard to read, but basically on the left side, we have each one of the elements written. You know, we keep referring to these numbers. Basically, the numbers are what is the standard, how the standard calls them out, right? So 4.1 is context. 5.2 is environmental policy. I think I mentioned on day one that the way the standard is written, they changed the order of some things in order to make it so that you can integrate across different standards. So environmental policy is 5.2. The quality policy within ISO 9000 is also 5.2. It's to make it easier for you guys to just have an integrated policy if that's what you choose to do, or have an integrated audit where you're looking at that same element number across the board. All right, so not everybody has a matrix like this, but this is just one way that you can put that plan in place to show when you're planning to perform those audits. Because remember, you have to have a planned interval. And you'll notice here, this is broken down by month, so they're not doing it all at one big swoop. But some things are being audited multiple times a year. Awareness is audited every single month because every time they do an audit, they're talking to folks about awareness. And then, you know, aspects are being looked at twice a year because it's more important. Remember, it's one of those baseline things that everything else kind of revolves around. So, all right. So that's an example of a plan. All right. So the organization must define the audit criteria and scope for each audit, select objective and impartial auditors. I'll be able to talk soon, I promise. Perform audit in an objective and impartial way, report results to relevant management. So basically what this is saying is you have to document both the process and the results to demonstrate the evidence of your implementation, right? So what is audit criteria? For EMS audits, the requirements can be, of course, those shall statements, right? That's where we all start. It says shall, so you have to do it. So what are you doing in order to meet what it says you shall do? It says you shall do something. It doesn't tell you how. So you're auditing to see how you did it, right? What is the evidence? Your EMS procedures, because you wrote those and you have to conform not only to the ISO standard, but also to your own process. SOPs, guidance documents, work instructions, anything like that. Again, that's things that you have written in order to meet those shall statements and any other requirements that you have put on yourself. Schedules, including your audit schedule, can be audited. So let's say you say you're going to audit awareness every month, but you didn't. That's a finding. So make sure that when you put a schedule in place that you're following it, or at least keeping it up to date with what you're actually doing. Monitoring schedules, calibration schedules, any kind of schedule, they're all up for grabs as far as looking at what you're going to be auditing against. Plans, so your goals. Remember, each one of your objectives now has to have a plan of action for how you're going to achieve that goal. So those plans can be audited, right? So that means you need to be keeping those up to date. So let's say part of your plan is to order a part, but for some reason it is now back ordered. Make sure you have documented in that plan why you're not achieving the original scheduled date. For accomplishing that. All right.
Angela?
Yes, sir.
I just had a thought. This section here is definitely to kind of go back to emergency planning in light of a pandemic. All of these would be impacted, you know, due to reduced staff or increased staff or
Absolutely.
just changes in that. So that just kind of triggered.
Yeah, no, good thought. Glad you brought it up. So yeah, absolutely. Once again, when you're doing that emergency planning piece, when you're performing that evaluation of what has changed because of the pandemic, make sure you keep this in mind. You know, can you even do audits in person anymore? So we've actually watched a webinar the other day on virtual auditing to just kind of wrap our heads around what we could possibly do internally for our members as far as that's concerned. So absolutely keep that in mind. Of course, you want to look at your EMS manual if you have one. Not everybody has a manual in quotation marks anymore. Your operational controls, remember we talked about that yesterday. A lot of that is SOPs, but it could also be signage, things that are posted around, your checklists, and of course, your monitoring matrix if you have one. Some folks audit mainly by element, but you may use other forms of auditing, including regulatory inspections as part of it. Not your whole thing, but that could at least be part of it. Any third-party audits that you have, emergency response actions, hazardous waste inspection checklists, all kinds of things can play into pieces of your audit, but those are all, you know, just a portion of what you need to look at for auditing your entire system. All right, so who's an auditor? Well, there is another ISO guidance document. It's 19,011, and I believe the most recent one is a 2018 version. I don't have it in here anymore. But anyway, so that guidance document says it's the person with the competence to conduct an audit. And competence, in this case, is two things. It's the person with the personal attributes listed in 19,011 and the person with the ability to apply skills, knowledge gained through education, training, work experience, and audit experience. So let's talk about the traits first. So those personal attributes, right? So according to 19,011, a good auditor should be all of these things. So they should be ethical, which is fair, truthful, sincere, honest, and discreet. They should be open-minded, willing to consider alternative ideas or points of view. They should be diplomatic, tactful in dealing with people. Observant, by actively observing physical surroundings and activities. Perceptive, in other words, they're aware of and able to understand various situations. Versatile, in other words, able to readily adapt to different situations. Tenacious, which is persistent and focused on achieving objectives. So a lot of times when you're out auditing and you're talking to somebody, being tenacious will be of great value when you're trying to get an answer and somebody either doesn't know or doesn't really want to tell you for one reason or another. You just have to keep asking questions in a different way in order to finally get to the bottom of what you want to know. And sometimes they just don't understand. Decisive, so the ability to reach timely conclusions based on logical reasoning and analysis. Self-reliant, they have to be able to act and function independently while interacting effectively with others. They also need to act with fortitude. They have to act responsibly and ethically, even though these actions may not always be popular and may sometimes result in a disagreement or confrontation. Open to improvement, willing to learn from situations and striving for better audit results. Culturally sensitive, so in other words, they need to be observant and respectful to the culture of the person that they are auditing. And then finally, collaborative. They need to effectively interact with others, including the audit team members and the auditee. So those are all the traits as far as the personal behavior that ISO would like to see in a good auditor. There are also knowledge and skills that can be learned. And those are on this slide. So they need to be able to apply audit principles, procedures, and methods. So that can be done through practice and training. They need to learn to plan and organize the work effectively. You'll find the more audits you do, the better prepared you are before you go out and start auditing, the better off you are and the easier the audit goes. You need to conduct the audit within the agreed time schedule. Time management is huge in auditing. You're never going to be able to get through everything that you would love to get through. So once you've either confirmed compliance or found one or two examples of your findings of non-conformance with the standard, then move on. You know, you don't have to keep digging and digging and digging and digging, because you have to cover the entire standard or the entire facility or the entire process that you're dealing with. So you can't let yourself get bogged down. You need to prioritize and focus on matters of significance, which also plays into what I was just talking about. Collect information through effective interviewing, listening, observing, and reviewing documents, records, and data. So I always like to audit in pairs because I have a really hard time both listening to asking a question and listening to the answer and preparing for the next answer if I'm also trying to take notes. And if I have to take notes, I mean, we have to take notes in order to be able to go back and write up these reports later, right? So there are lots of different little tips and tricks that you can use to kind of take those notes, go back and follow up on items and things like that. Maybe you have a separate sheet that you take a note of something that you want to follow up on versus the answer to the actual question that you're asking at that moment. You need to understand and consider expert opinions. Understand the appropriateness and consequences of using sampling techniques for auditing. So that's where I was talking about, we always ask those awareness questions when we're auditing of all kinds of different folks. That way, by the time we get through the full year's worth cycle of the auditing matrix, we have a good sample of our facilities employees. You need to verify the relevance and accuracy of collected information, confirm sufficiency and appropriateness of audit evidence to support your findings and conclusions. So again, that goes back to once you have confirmed that something is either conforming or not conforming, being able to move on, but being sure of that conformance or non-conformance before you do. Assess factors that may affect the reliability of your findings. You know, how much hearsay is there in what you're learning? How much concrete evidence, records, that kind of thing can you find to document it? You want to use work documents to record audit activities, document audit findings, and prepare appropriate audit reports. Maintain the confidentiality and security of information, data, documents, and records. And of course, communicate effectively, orally and in writing, either personally or through the use of interpreters and translators. This is super important in auditing. You need to not only be able to communicate with the folks that you're asking the questions of, but also with management to let them know what your findings are. You need to be able to do that both verbally and in writing, because you have to document your findings in a report format, whether that's on paper or an electronic format. And then finally, you need to understand the types of risks associated with auditing. So those can be physical, because you have to watch out for forklifts running around you. And also, you know, sometimes people just don't like being questioned, and it can get a little dicey as far as just, you know, being aware of people's touchiness sometimes. All right, so that's auditing. Does anybody have any questions on internal auditing? Has
I don't
anyone
see
been
any.
part of
Sorry,
a?
I don't.
That's okay.
Don't see any hands raised yet, but feel free to do so.
All right. So
Angela?
moving, yes, sir.
Before you move on from internal auditing, are there any services that the ESI group can provide for that?
Scott, I love you. So thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, the ESI, we perform actually an internal auditor course that we have been doing on site at facilities. That the first part of the morning is a training, like classroom style training, and then in the afternoon we do a mock audit. And we try and make sure we offer that at least twice a year, but our members can actually ask us to come on site at their facility for their employees, as long as there's at least 4 or 5 folks that they need to get some training for. And we love it when they're willing to open that up to other members for that class. Right now, we can't really go and travel and do that, so we're going to look at potentially making some sort of virtual version of that. I'm not sure how that would work with the whole mock audit piece. So that's one thing that we do to help facilities. We have the functionally equivalent audits, of course, that we've already talked about. Those are more second party audits. We've talked about third party. That's where you pay somebody who is completely independent to come in and talk to you. We don't consider ourselves completely independent because we have the relationship of being member program. So we call ourselves a second party audit. For example, vendors and customers would also be considered second party audits if you had them come in for you. And then finally, we are happy to participate on audits with you. We don't like to lead them as your internal auditor, but we're happy to be members of a team that is performing an internal audit at your facility. So for our members, let us know if you would like for us to do any of those things. Again, right now we kind of have some travel restrictions, at least until we get into phase 3 for the pandemic. But at some point we'll get back to normal and can do those things. So did I miss anything, Scott? Were those the things you were thinking about?
Yes, and we actually are helping a ESI member with the transition between the older version and the newer version,
Yeah.
and doing some gap analysis as well.
Oh, that's right. Yes, we do gap analysis. We have a great tool that was originally developed by NC State's Industry Expansion Solutions that is a very visual spreadsheet tool. It gives you a bar chart that shows you how close you are to actually having your facilities EMS implemented completely. So for our members, we can share that as well. All right. Good. Thanks, Scott. Oops, too far. Here we go. All right, management review. So management review has been part of the standard forever, but the 2015 version has really expanded both what they say are inputs for the management review and the outputs, right? So 9.3 is the element for management review, and it says top management shall review the organization's EMS at planned intervals to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness. So this is saying exactly the same thing as it did in 2004, I think, down to the top management shall review that. We'll talk about suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness in a minute. Management review shall include consideration of the status of actions from previous management reviews. That's always been there. But new in the 2015 standard, it also has to look at changes in external and internal issues that are relevant to the EMS, needs and expectations of your interested parties, including any compliance obligations, the organization's significant environmental aspects, any changes in your risks and opportunities. And as far as suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness. In the annex, there's a note that suitability refers to how the EMS fits your organization, its operations, culture, and business systems. Adequacy, that's referring to whether it meets the requirements of the international standard and is implemented appropriately. And then effectiveness refers to whether it's achieving the desired results that you're going for. So when top management is needing to make a determination on that, you need to be considering what kinds of information you need to give them in order to be able to make a judgment call on whether or not it's still suitable, adequate, and effective. All right. This is another one of those elements that has the requirement that it be done at planned intervals without giving you a specific time frame. And again, typically we see these at least annually. I have seen them done biannually. I've seen them done quarterly. I've even seen them break it down into smaller pieces so that everything gets talked about over the course of a year, but it's done in small monthly installments. So it's really up to you how you perform this. But the planned intervals are what your organization decides works best. Sometimes it's held weekly, sometimes it's a lot less frequently. So it can also be combined. We've talked about that too. You know, it can be the environmental management system in cooperation with the quality, in cooperation with your safety and security, whatever other kinds of meetings that you're having. But any of that's fine as long as you've documented it as your planned interval. All right, so the standard also says that management reviews shall include consideration of the extent to which your environmental objectives have been achieved. So what kinds of information are you going to need to provide to top management to show where you are on your environmental goals? Whether that's a bunch of charts and graphs or some other visual for them to understand where you stand. Information on the organization's environmental performance, including trends in your nonconformities and your corrective actions, your monitoring and measurement results. Again, this is probably tied up here to your objectives, but it may be additional things as well. Fulfillment of your compliance obligations. Remember, that's more than just legal. That's also the other things that you have agreed to be a part of. For those of you who are members of the ESI, that includes our annual report. And then, of course, audit results. Management review shall also include consideration of adequacy of resources. So that means top management has to make sure that the EMS has what it needs in order to function appropriately. Remember that whole suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness piece. Well, how can it be adequate if you don't have the resources you need in order to have a functioning system? Relevant communications from any interested parties, including any complaints. And then, of course, opportunities for continual improvement. And just remember that resources includes money, people, equipment, technology, or anything else that might be needed to maintain and continually improve your EMS. So those are all the inputs. Now let's talk about the outputs from your management review. So all of those things are stuff that you put in. This is what top management needs to give you, right? So this needs to be documented. So in 2004, the standard stated that the output from the management review shall include any decisions and actions related to possible changes to environmental policy, objectives and targets, and other elements of the EMS consistent with the commitment to continual improvement. It didn't specifically include suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness as an outcome, although it did say you shall determine. So we always looked at it as needing some sort of determination noted. All right, but now in the 2015 version, the outputs say they shall include that conclusion on that continuing suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of the EMS. It also needs decisions related to continual improvement opportunities, any decisions related to the need for changes in the EMS, including any resources that might be needed, and actions, if needed, what environmental objectives have not been achieved or anything along those lines. So your outputs shall also include the opportunities for improvement of integration into your EMS with your other business processes and any implications for the strategic direction of your organization. So this is actually a really good place where for you to make sure that you're addressing context. So remember, Marcia talked about context on day one, and it's that framework piece. It doesn't change a whole lot, but if you put it into management review, it gives you a good place to document if something changes and to keep track of it that way. And we always suggest that you come up with some sort of meeting minutes document that gives you a place to just kind of do a check mark that yes, you actually took care of all of the pieces that the standard is requiring you to do. And you can add others to this as well. But this gives you, for example, this form is in that the design guidance, and it gives you a place to record, when it happened, who was there, that you hit all of the inputs and any comments. It gives you a place to actually take those minutes in relation to each one of those topics. So you have the ability to demonstrate to an auditor that you actually performed all of the functions necessary. All right, and then the organization shall retain documented information as evidence of the results. So you're actually required to have some sort of evidence. So this is just one way that we like to see that evidence shown. Particularly, we've been recommending a form like this for a really long time to just have a check mark on there that says the suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness were determined. So you just check that off and you're good to go, because otherwise it wouldn't necessarily have gotten into your meeting minutes or wouldn't necessarily be interpreted in that way. Okay. Any questions on management review?
Don't see any hands raised at this time.
Okay. All right. So we're getting down to the end. Yay. So we're going to be talking about non-conformance and corrective action now. All right. So 10.1 and 10.2. So 10.1 says the organization shall determine opportunities for improvement and implement necessary actions to achieve intended outcomes of the EMS.
Angela?
Yes, sir.
We actually had a question come in.
Okay.
And if you don't mind answering or going back, could you restate the definitions of suitable, adequate, and effective?
Sure. Absolutely. All right. So if you look in the annex, if you happen to have a copy of the ISO 14001 standard, the annex notes that the suitability refers to how the EMS fits the organization, its operations, its culture, and its business systems. Adequacy refers to when it meets the requirements of the international standard and that it's implemented appropriately. And then finally, effectiveness refers to when it's achieving the desired results, right? So suitability is all about, does it fit? Does it make sense for your organization? Adequacy is, all right, so you've implemented a system. Is it doing what you need it to do, right? And then effectiveness is, all right, so you have the system in place. Are there any changes you need to make in order to make it more effective, right? Is it achieving the desired result yet? Make sense? That help? All right.
We got confirmation, yes. Good job.
Oh, cool. Thank you. All right. So back to this. So 10.1 is just a general statement. Basically, this is like Marsha was talking about earlier, you know, there are several spots within the standard where they give auditors the ability to refer to a specific element when something just isn't fully formed or they're not seeing the continual improvement that they want, right? So the organization shall determine opportunities for improvement and implement necessary actions to achieve intended outcomes. So that's just saying that you're actually looking for that continual improvement piece, right? One of the ways that you can do that is within your internal audit system. Instead of just having findings, you can also be looking for those opportunities for improvement and documenting them during that. When a non-conformance occurs, so now there's a difference between non-conformance and non-compliance. So a non-conformance is not meeting the standard or not meeting the documentation that you have set out for yourself. So your own processes and procedures that you have defined, right? Whereas a non-compliance, that is regulatory specifically. So that is compliance in the DEQ sense, not in the ISO 14001 sense. So when we're talking about non-conformances, that it can include non-compliances, but it's also broader than that. It's when you're not meeting your EMS. So it's those findings that you have during your internal audits, or you might have a program where folks can actually submit items for review that they see in between audits. All right, so when a nonconformance occurs, the organization shall react to that nonconformance as applicable. You need to take action to control and correct it, and then deal with any consequences, which includes mitigating adverse environmental impacts. Then you also need to evaluate the need for action to eliminate the cause of the nonconformance by first reviewing that nonconformance, then determining the cause of it, and then determining if similar nonconformities exist or could potentially occur. Now, this is new. In the previous standard, they actually talked about preventive action. In the 2015 version of the standard, they kind of tucked preventive action into this statement. Determine if similar nonconformances exist or could potentially occur. I don't particularly agree with this particular change in the standard, but it's there. So you no longer have to basically be proactive about preventive actions, although they are looking for opportunities for improvement. But anytime you have an issue that you have performed a root cause analysis on, then you also need to take into account, can you implement those changes anywhere else within your organization in order to keep a similar issue from occurring. Then you also need to implement any action needed, review that effectiveness of that action, and then make changes to your environmental management system if necessary. So corrective actions, they shall be appropriate to the significance of the effects of the nonconformity encountered. In other words, you know, if it's a really big problem, you need a really big response. If it's something minor, then you may not need quite as big a response. You know, you don't always have to go after everything with the largest response, but you also shouldn't underestimate the impact that your analysis and reactions should be. And then the organization shall retain documented information as evidence of, so in other words, the record of the nature of the nonconformity and any subsequent actions taken and the result of any corrective actions. And then finally, the last element of the ISO standard is about continual improvement. So the organization shall continually improve the suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of the EMS to enhance environmental performance. So again, that goes back to all of what you're doing within the entire standard is about that continual improvement piece. And this gives auditors a place to actually refer to that continual improvement piece. So let's talk a little bit about root cause. We found our members sometimes have a little bit of a challenge with root cause, and so we always like to talk about it a little bit more in depth. So root cause is a factor that caused the nonconformance, and it should be permanently eliminated through a process of improvement, right? So root cause analysis, it's a collective term, describes a whole bunch of different things, tools, techniques that are used to uncover the causes of these problems. When you're trying to determine root cause, you really want to try to avoid operator error. Operator error implies that the operator is willfully doing things wrong, when it's more likely that they just don't know what's right, or the expected way, or there is some obstacle preventing them from doing it the right way. It could be training was needed, it could be a lack of signage, it could be a language barrier, it could be unclear or non-existent work instructions. It could be that you have written work instructions, but somebody who has a little bit more seniority has told them to do it a different way, and so now they are not sure which way is right. It could be resources. It could be somebody is trying to juggle too many things at once, and they just don't have enough time to do it the way the procedure is written. So there's a lot more likely causes than the operator is willfully doing something wrong. So if you can at all avoid operator error as your root cause, do it. You know, make sure that you have found any other causes that would mean the operator made a mistake, right? Okay. When you're determining root cause, there are a bunch of different tools. This is just a few from a Google search I did. I don't know which ones you guys might use, but we're going to talk about two that are fairly simple. I do know a few of our facilities use the DMAIC method. I've seen cause mapping out there. I've seen 8Ds out there. Some of these other pieces you might use in analysis, but aren't necessarily the full root cause. But the two we're going to talk about today are 5 whys and fishbone diagrams, also called Ishikawas. So in the handouts over on the right side, we have taken out, I don't remember what I took out, but we took one thing out, and now we have this root cause exercise Word document in here. So if you'll open that up, we'll go through a couple of exercises. All right, and then that should be it for the day, and you guys will go off rejoicing. All right, let me see if I can get this down so I can bring up the document. All right, so this is what that Word document should look like. So what I'd like for each of you to do is look at this first example here and using 5 whys. So the way this works is you figure out what your problem is, right? So in this case, the problem statement is you've got cardboard that's banned from the landfill, and a facility's been fined for sending cardboard to that landfill. And upon inspection of the general waste dumpster, it's obvious that the cardboard is being thrown into the landfill dumpster. So what we want you to do from that statement, be as creative as you want to be in your head. Ask yourself why 5 times. So why is it being thrown into the dumpster? Come up with an answer. And then you ask yourself why to that answer. And then you come up with another answer, right? And then you ask yourself why to that answer. You do that 5 times and you should come close to getting a root cause, right? Again, be creative. This was a real life example. So I could potentially answer questions, but it's not necessary for you to come up with the same conclusion that we got in that particular instance. But think about this, because it's a fairly consistent, easy to visualize issue, right? You can think of a million reasons why this might be happening, right? So I'm going to let you guys work on that one for a little bit. It is almost 2:15. So what I'm going to do is say, let's come back together at 2:30. That gives you time to work on this. And if you need to take a potty break or something, go ahead and do that. And then we'll talk about this one. We'll do one more exercise, and then we'll wrap up, right? So we'll talk to you again at 2:30. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So, does anybody want to share what they came up with for their 5 whys on this cardboard example?
So our illustrious colleague, Tom Rhodes, wrote a few things in. He had recycling market can no longer take cardboard.
Okay. Is
Cardboard.
that the root cause, or is that a one of the whys?
I think it might be one of the whys.
Okay.
Cardboard recycling containers full, so the material's thrown in the dumpster. No one called the recycling hauler to let them know the container was full.
Mm-hmm. So why did they not call? Would be my next why.
Got another one coming here from Sydney. One of my whys, after asking why the dumpster was being used, was why there's no signage on the dumpster.
Good. Good. Yeah.
And Angela, Christopher Law has his hand raised. Christopher, you're live.
Hello, everyone. Maybe they have multiple people throwing cardboard out at different times of the day, and they have a lot of care about which receptacle to use.
So why would they not know which receptacle to use might be the next why you would ask. Yep.
And Charles Saunders. Charles, you're live.
I've got no other waste containers available, no signage, no standard operating procedure, no training, and then no accountability. My root cause would be no standard operating procedure.
Okay. Good. Good. All right. So you guys seem to have 5 whys down pretty well. Yes.
Angela, we have one more from Leon.
Sure. Okay.
You're live.
Okay, I have employees do not know cardboard is banned from the landfill because there's no notifications of the requirements such as signs, etc. Why implementation and training was not sufficient. Why the supervisors were trained on the requirement, but they did not ensure that all the affected employees were trained as well. And it was assumed that the supervisors would train their own employees. And then the root cause ends up being no process to ensure all affected employees are trained.
Great. Good job. Yeah. So it sounds like you guys pretty much understand 5 whys. Is this what you guys, use most of the time in your facilities? You can just raise your hand if this is a known entity to you, you guys use 5 whys fairly frequently.
Yeah, we've got about 5 hands raised. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this one is probably the easiest of the root cause techniques to use. It's great if a problem isn't super complex, but sometimes you have something that's a little more interesting to deal with. So you guys can scroll down. Hang on, I'll bring it back up. If you scroll down to the next page, there's another little picture there, but I am going to go back to the presentation right quick and give you another example and another tool. All right, so the next tool we're going to talk about is Fishbone Diagram. So to me, this is kind of like 5 whys on steroids a little bit. You break it down and you can have multiple causes for the same problem. So it's a good method for slightly more complex issues that might have multiple underlying causes. It helps by breaking it down into possible categories, into these 6 basic categories you can see on the screen. And you can combine this with the 5 whys to break it down even further into primary, secondary, and potentially further causes. So when we're talking about here, these 6 categories, we're talking about equipment, which means the machinery or calibration, anything to do with the actual the static piece of equipment that you're working with. And then you've got the process, which is how you are using that piece of equipment, or other work instructions that might be affected. This is actually the flow. This is what you are doing. And then you've got the human element, the people. So this can, of course, be those misreadings, the language barriers, anything along those lines that might be specific to the people. Finally, you've got materials. So this is any of the components or raw materials that may be causing an issue. The environment, in this case, we're not talking about the environment as in you would have pollution to the environment, but really it's everything, the entire building, your logistics, your space. And then management, of course, this is any higher level decisions or rules that are in place, right? So in this case, we're going to use an example of a powder coating booth. So this is a powder coating line. I don't know if you've ever seen one, but this is just one version of that. The tall enclosure that's open on the end, so this is down here, is a tunnel that contains multiple spray nozzles, and each of the smaller metal boxes attached, these down here, these are all these smaller metal boxes. This entire thing has spray nozzles all the way through it. But the smaller metal boxes attached to the side at the bottom contain large quantities of liquid. So powder coating typically has multiple stages of cleaning and an etching process that occurs prior to the spraying on of dry powder paint. The painted part then goes through a curing oven where the paint melts together and integrates with the part itself through the etched areas. So this is a real life example. My past life before I came to work with DEQ was in a coating facility. So we had both electrocoating and powder coating, as well as a zinc phosphate line. So this actually happened on our powder coat line. So this is a real life example. The site has 3 lines. The electrocoating dip line, like I mentioned, the powder coating line, and a rarely used zinc phosphating line. The electrocoating and powder coating lines both operate 3 shifts, 5 to 6 days a week. There is 1 laboratory technician who worked on each shift to test the bath chemistry of each stage on both lines. They also performed wastewater pretreatment functions and performed the reporting functions related to those operations. Here is a layout of that facility. So there's this office space up front with a solid wall here. There was a big training room here, and then upstairs from that on the second level were offices for the supervisor of the e-coat line and the powder line. I sat up there as the quality engineer, and then our human resources training person was also up in this office. There was a lab, which was also down here in this area. Our shipping and receiving happened through a couple of dock doors that were in this vicinity. You've got your electrocoat line. This was a little parts cleaning area, a wheelabrator line. Then this is the zinc line, and then there's the powder coat line. So there's a long way between the lab and the powder coat line, and depending on where they are in here, they may not be able to see all the way down the space. So just keep that in mind because it'll be important in a minute. All right, so here's your problem, right? So this problem statement would go in the little head of your fish. It's called a fishbone diagram because that's what it looks like, is a fish, right? So you've got the problem statement that over a period of 6 weeks during the summer, liquid had to be cleaned up off the floor in this area being the powder line area, 4 times. So the quantity of liquid varied and the time between the events was irregular. However, the liquid always occurred on 3rd shift. So we always found it first thing in the morning. So what kinds of questions might you ask me, right? So we go back to here. Let's start with equipment. So remember, we could use the 5 whys, or you could just have some questions for me. So what might be an issue for the powder coat line that is equipment related that would cause water on the floor every morning? Assuming it was water, it was liquid.
We had one come in, improper maintenance.
That's possible. Yeah. What kind of maintenance? What specifically could be wrong with the equipment that would cause the liquid to be on the floor?
Here's another one, but maybe related, drain overflow.
Potentially, yeah.
So there's a question, is operation of some equipment at night specific? So evening shift specific? Or is the operation the same on every shift? That's the question.
Yeah, it's similar on every shift. I'm trying to remember. No, I think it pretty much, let's just say it's the same on every shift. Okay. So
we had another one, a
yeah.
leak, which again might go back to improper maintenance.
Potentially, yeah, absolutely.
Or faulty equipment.
Right. So let's move on to process. I'll give you the full answer at some point, but let's go through each one of these first. So process, what kinds of process things might be an issue? You have any questions for me on process?
Is it a 24-hour process?
There are 3 shifts, so yes, it is running 24 hours. Something you might need to know is that the 3rd rinse tank has to be manually filled with water.
Are all shift operations the same?
Yes. At least on that line.
There's maybe issues from changeover, and I'm assuming you mean changeover of staff and not like changeover of parts.
Potentially. So you might not have caught it, but this happened over a period of 6 weeks in the summer. And it happened 4 times. And I believe I said there's 1 lab tech that worked on each shift. So typically we had 3 people.
And can you clarify what you said about the water? I think you said the last tank was filled with water.
Oh, the 3rd rinse tank had to be manually filled with water. The others have working valves, which goes back to the equipment question or equipment maintenance from before. So the question you didn't ask is what was wrong with the tank, and there is a broken float valve in that 3rd rinse tank. Therefore, the autofill function was not working, which required them to actually be manually filling it with water.
So there's a good question, condensation from a cold surface. You were saying it's summertime, so potentially if there was a cold surface, maybe condensation forming on that?
This is all either heated or room temperature water. Yeah, but good thought. So they're using a garden hose to do that manual filling. The process of that is that the lab techs turn it on and leave it running while they perform other duties. And the rinse tanks are emptied when the drag out from the previous tanks over-contaminates the rinse water. So remember, we're talking about a rinse tank that has to be manually filled. Okay, so moving on to people. I mentioned that it was summer. So what happens when you have 3 lab technicians, one responsible for each shift, and then somebody wants to take a vacation? So in the people category, what we looked at was error. Yes. That is exactly it. I like it. Definitely an error. So during this time, there were 2 lab techs available to cover all 3 shifts. And other employees that worked on that powder coat line could do some things, but they could not deal with tank chemistry. So there's an issue there. The only material here is water. It was a rinse tank, so there was nothing inherently dangerous other than the potential slipping on a floor, but there was nothing in what was on the floor causing an issue because it was the makeup water, not the drained water. So I will help you eliminate materials as a potential issue. Environment. So in that area, remember I showed you this picture of, whoops, this is the setup. So here's where the lab is located. Here's where the powder coat is located. So when we're talking about environment, what kinds of issues might that cause? I should also probably tell you that the way it was set up, it ran like a big U. So this was basically along this line here. And so they would load parts in this area onto that chain that you can see. They would go through the pre-treatment, the rinse and clean and etch tanks on this side. They would go through a drying oven, come around into a clean room where the powder is actually applied in this vicinity. Then they would go back up, and above the original oven, there is a curing oven that's slightly hotter. So they did actually have some heat sense going on here. So then it would be cured, and then it would come back out down here where it was loaded and be unloaded in the same general vicinity. So if the lab is here and the tanks they're dealing with are here, and the smaller tanks are actually on the right side, what kind of issues might you have?
So there was a thought that came in, or a question: did any other employees witness the filling of the rinse tank other than the lab tech?
Witness the filling. I guess they could have noticed it. The person who should have noticed it besides the lab techs would have been the supervisor, but their office is not out here at the powder line, it's up here. So if they went to their office to do some paperwork or something, they're up here in the same vicinity as the lab tech. So remember, this happened over the course of 6 weeks, 4 times. So. All right, so the issues I came up with environmentally is the lab is located on the far side of the building from the powder line. And since it's being filled manually, we're talking about 200 gallons of water. I don't think I mentioned that. That was under the equipment section. But 200 gallons of water. So they would start this garden hose and then they would walk away to do other things because they are covering multiple spaces for a longer period of time, you know, because we've gone from 3 people to 2. To cover that space of time while people are going on vacations and it's rotating through. It's not even the same person every time because we have like one vacation after another because we're talking about over the summer, right? So the lab being located on the far side of the building from the powder line and with the side of the powder line facing away from them that the water is going into, that could be an issue, that line of sight. other environmental things, the tanks are situated such that they face that back wall, so it's not in the line of sight of the offices or the lab. So that also is an issue if the supervisor's up here. All right. So, whoops, I keep going the wrong direction. All right. So the next piece would be management. And remember, these are those higher level decisions and rules. So what kinds of management decisions could have an issue, could have caused part of this issue? Does anybody have any ideas on that?
Yes, we have Charles. Charles, you are now live.
Yeah, not enough manpower.
For sure. Absolutely. There was no cross training going on to be able to cover when somebody went on vacation, other than, you know, having the other two lab techs take up the slot. All right. The other part of that,
schedules.
Yeah, coordinating schedules, absolutely. Something else that can sometimes be an issue in this situation. So we had one lab tech. They were responsible for both the electric coat line and the powder coat line. And the electric coat line has a similar set of tanks. It's a dip process instead of a spray process, but those tanks have the same chemistry issues. So they're having to do tests over here as well as back here. So that goes back to that not having enough manpower to make sure that everything is being accomplished when you're down a person, right? So
2 items came in about the broken valve. One is not ensuring that there's a process when the machine valve is broken. So kind of like, okay, it's broken, what do we do? And the second is just kind of complacency. So accepting the broken valve.
Yep. So hopefully this helps a little bit with you guys seeing all the different possibilities. So yes, there was a broken valve, but the water on the floor wasn't just the broken valve. It was also the fact that there was not a good process in place to make sure that that while we were waiting for the new valve to come in to be installed, that it wouldn't run over, because it also happened that the people were during a time of vacations and there was not enough coverage. The environment was an issue of where things were seated. You know, the lab was too far away from where this particular process was happening, and management wasn't paying enough attention during that period of time, didn't cross-train folks in order to help out, didn't notice in time to stop the overflow. So you can see there were multiple root causes to this particular event. And so this more complex version of doing a Fishbone helped us to figure out all the different pieces that needed to be fixed. All right, did that help? I hope. Alrighty, so that's it. We have made it all the way through the standard. So congratulations, you survived. You survived our first attempt at doing this online with outside folks. We did do a version of this with our coaches not long ago, so we did have a little bit of practice online. Does anybody have any questions about anything we've talked about over the past 4 days? All right, so some of you have noticed on your way out of the webinar that there is an evaluation form. It's got 6 questions. If you haven't already filled it out, please do that for us and think about all 4 days. If you've been filling it out every day, thank you, thank you, thank you. We have been reading the responses that we've been getting on those. It's super helpful for us, especially with this new format, to know what we can do better, what kinds of things you appreciated hearing, what you'd like to hear more about. So hope you all have a great rest of the afternoon. Let me check one more time. Do we have any questions before I sign off?
We did have a question about the recording from day 1. I know you sent out a link to that, but someone might not have gotten that, or for those who might not have gotten that.
So I sent out that link on Tuesday. If you did not receive that, shoot me an email, and I will send that back out to you. My email address is angela.barger@ncdenr.gov. And yeah, I'll send that back out. And again, in case you weren't on when we first started, there was a technical issue with yesterday's recording, but I did send you the slides. So if you have any questions at all about anything we talked about yesterday, I'll be happy to help with those. I apologize that the recording didn't work. I've double checked today. It says we're being recorded, so hopefully this one will be out to you in a day or two. Anything else?
And thanks to those who, there's a lot of positive kudos here, so appreciate that from you all.
We do appreciate it, and I hope any of you who are members, please reach out to your coaches if you need any assistance at all. If it's EMS related, just have a question, feel free to reach out to any of us who've been doing the training. And if you're not yet a member and you're interested, feel free to shoot me an email, and we will be happy to tell you more about the program and send you an application and that kind of thing. So we'd love to see you on our splash page list that we showed you on Monday. All right, so going once, going twice. Anybody got anything else they want to ask? All righty. Well, I hope you all have a great afternoon. Thank you for your participation. It has been a huge help. It's really hard since we're used to doing this live to kind of talk to space. So thank you for talking back to me. That helps a lot. All righty. So have a great afternoon, everybody.